constant demand for consistent performance. This is what Metallic Child expects from you. You choose a stage, you choose your weapons, you choose your skills. Then it's just you against rooms and rooms of enemies. A marathon of comboing and dodging and upgrading, trying to get those S ranks. Why do this? Well, because S ranks are only given when you complete a room without getting hit. You need your HP to be as high as possible. When you finally get to that third stage and face off against the boss, you'll want to guarantee the best chance of you winning. The odds are against you. The enemies outnumber you. The boss, usually, outdamages you. Your basic attacks are weak, and walking into a boss arena with low HP and bad upgrades will likely throw you out of a 30-minute run, back to the beginning of the level. And that feeling, when you've tried your absolute best, only for the game to smack your face into the wall for not being quite good enough. That feeling can absolutely drain your desire to play this game. So, you've got two choices. Accept defeat and go play something else. Or, you go back in there, you aim for those S ranks, learn when to fight, when not to fight. How do I avoid this guy's attack patterns? Is it with the dodge roll or with the shield parry? I know how this boss fight works now. Maybe I can still win even if I don't have that much HP. And then, you hear that sound again. You're at the boss again. You're dodging, you're struggling, and by the skin of your very teeth, you get them just low enough. Are you going to make it? You don't know. But then you see it, the killing blow, and you go for it. You get to experience another chapter in the story. Most of all, you get to do it all over again. This is why I enjoy playing Metallic Child. Developed by Studio HG and published by Crest, this game's demand for performance is a never-ending dopamine tug-of-war. Something to keep in mind before we dive deeper into this game is that this is a budget roguelite that flew under most people's radar when it released back in 2021. It doesn't have the production quality of similar roguelites like Hades, but clearly it is not just spawning into the zone and playing through the game like Curse of the Dead Gods. Metallic Child is trying to give you an actual story with characters that the game wants you to care about. You can appreciate the effort through the game's introduction. The game begins with you seeing Rona, an android who wakes up broken and beaten on the space station livestream. You, as in literally you, somehow contact her from Earth as she requests your help in navigating her body out of the area. Apparently, every gamer on Earth can contact a space station by accident when they were just trying to figure out how to pirate Starfield. So you control her remotely and watch from an isometric point of view, helping her fight her way out and escape back to her friend Pan, who's thankful Rona survived, but is understandably suspicious of an internet stranger contacting a child.
Oh, hell no, man.
A metallic child, to be exact. Sentient, autonomous androids powered by an energy source called Core Gems, with the initial purpose of being available to childless households. The Metallic Child project was funded by Right Shade Industries and spearheaded by Dr. Irene, a brilliant scientist with blue eyes and white hair who's essentially Rona's mother. However, the project had issues commercializing due to high maintenance costs of keeping metallic children running. So Dr. Locus, working under the same company and against Dr. Irene's wishes, sought to pivot the Metallic Child project to something more sinister. I mean, just look at this guy. He just woke up one day and decided to exude straight up, I am the antagonist energy. However, what is not clear early on is that soon afterwards, chaos had erupted. The space station was suddenly under attack by the other metallic children as they started their own rebellion and took the station's core gems for themselves. Without core gem energy to control the space station, Lifestream would inevitably fall straight into Earth. So, it's up to Rona, Pan, and you to figure out what's going on. Rona will have to confront every other metallic child, defeat them for their core gem, and slowly obtain archive data on Dr. Irene's involvement before the robot rebellion to learn the truth. That is the initial setup for this game, and honestly, I like how strong of a first impression the game makes. The world is cool, the art is nice, and the characters are likable. Rona wears her heart on her sleeve, being willing to fight, but also sincere to anyone close to her. Pan acts like a protective big brother who plays a support role, and I guess you happen to be a random epic gamer willing to spend the next week saving the world. It frames the game in a very simple way. Defeat the bosses in any order you want, and the game's story will unfold naturally. Even though it's not in English, the dialogue is fully voiced in either Japanese or, interestingly enough, Korean. The menus are slick and readable. The graphics, though looking like they were under a strict polygon budget, are colorful and follow a cool, saturated animated art style. The cutscenes are mostly 3D character models standing still with occasional illustration, but the character expressions and the dialogue do enough of a good job to eventually make you look past that. You'll treat them more like an in-game visual novel, and from my perspective, this is probably Studio HG's attempt at having cutscenes without outstretching their resources. Overall, I really do like the presentation of this game, and it's clear that Studio HG was trying to punch above their weight in this regard. And man, the music. The music can surprisingly be good. From what I've been able to read, the original soundtrack is composed by two people whose names I'm definitely going to butcher trying to say. Here's a sample from the first composer, Kim Hyung. And here's a sample from the second composer of the game, Lee Sailun. Good stuff. What's even more impressive is that every boss in the game has their own unique boss music that helps you get pumped up for every fight. If I had to criticize anything about the music, it's this track in particular. Yeah, I hope you like that beat, because you're gonna listen to it a lot. Because despite the quality of the rest of the soundtrack, this one song seems to show up way too much, blurring what feels like a 30-second loop that never ends. Alright. At this point, you might be thinking, listen, Mr. Omen Man, you talked about the story, you talked about the music, but what about the gameplay? Well, I think the gameplay is good, but good in spite of its various flaws. Let's start with the good. What I appreciate about Metallic Child is that it makes an honest attempt at trying to vary the levels up in order to keep things interesting. One area in a level has you fighting enemies on a single descending platform, whereas one of the coolest levels in the game has Rona riding on a bike, shooting laser beams and dodging enemies as dance music blares in the background. And of course, the star of every level is the unique Metallic Child you get to face down against. Each Metallic Child has their own unique design, their own dialogue against Rona, and their own boss attacks that requires paying attention to. You get a proper assortment of weirdos, from a spunky four-legged fire chick who only wants to fight to measure your abilities, to big girl who loves you so much she'll make you stay permanently. What truly makes each boss battle exciting is during the fight when the boss enters into second gear mode, where halfway through their HP bar they'll decide to power up like it's out of Dragon Ball Z, and that's when you know it's gamer time. You die, you start the entire level over again. So this is your time to get serious. Get good, get that boss kill, and watch as Rona gets the next core gem. It's just a really satisfying gameplay loop. As much as it can be soul draining to have to redo the entire level again when you lose, managing to beat the boss and watching that S rank pop on the screen just makes you feel godlike. That dopamine rush is so good, you just want to do it all over again. The presentation, the music, the bosses, I believe these things are probably the strongest parts of Metallic Child. However, with all of that being said, no matter what, 90% of what you actually do in the game is just straight up fighting rooms of enemies. This is the bulk of the game. So let's talk about the combat. The combat works like this. You have a basic attack that you can either combo or hold for a charge attack. You can jump, which is useful to avoiding ground attacks, or do in combination with a charge attack for a ground pound. The charge attack is important because enemies might spawn with a shield that will bounce back your basic attacks, so you want to use that to break it. Or, you can press the throw button to slam shielded enemies into the wall to break them instead. Actually, throws are a great way to deal with enemies in general, either into walls or into other enemies. Throws are also useful to make space for yourself or to pull a certain enemy away from mobs. You can choose from 3 weapons: Gauntlet, Hammer, and the Sword and Shield. Unfortunately, these are the only weapon archetypes in the game, but at least each one has their own role. Gauntlets are great for comboing enemies and providing fast attacks, while the hammers are slower but do have a wider attack radius to hit enemies with. Both the gauntlets and the hammer lets you dodge roll. However, when you equip the sword and shield, the dodge button will instead make you guard. And if you guard just before an enemy attacks, you'll perform a just guard that will deal damage back to the enemy. Both rolling, guarding, throwing, and even weapon skills take stamina to perform, which you gain back by attacking enemies. So you're always incentivized to hammer down mobs to top up your stamina gauge. Talking about weapon skills, they spice up the combat because certain weapons will have unique weapon skills. The skills for your vanilla weapons are pretty weak, and it isn't initially clear why you want to use them during a fight over a normal combo attack. At least, that's what I thought when I first got into this game. Guards are cool, but I'd rather dodge roll like my Elden Rings. Skills are cool, but I just want to bonk my way to victory. That was working pretty well until I hit the 3rd level, Gigantic stage. Holy hell, if you're like me and are just playing the bosses in order, this level's a nasty difficulty spike. Enemies that wombo combo you, enemies that shoot projectiles, stage hazards that just screw you over. And when I finally got to the boss, I just got my ass handed to me instead. And I kept getting slapped on that stage. In fact, I'll admit it, I was stuck for a while, banging my head against the wall hoping that if I kept doing the same thing over and over and over again, things would change. It was at this point I had a pretty negative opinion of this game, for multiple reasons. Unlike other action games, the enemies in Metallic Child are unusually aggressive. You know in games like Arkham Asylum, where you're surrounded by mobs and while beating out one dude, someone from the crowd will make it clear they'll try to intervene? Metallic Child doesn't play like that. Yes, enemies may do a blink, indicating an attack, but not always, and they won't wait for their friends to make a move either. In Metallic Child, if there's a crowd of enemies near you as you're beating down one of their friends, the enemies will not hesitate to mob you like his invasion party from Elden Ring. It's just you. You can only perform one action at a time. If there's 3 enemies, they can perform 3 actions at a time. So part of the frustration was constantly dealing with aggressive enemy mobs whose mom said it's their turn to play on the N64. The other issue I was having with this game is that the combat felt clunky. However, whenever people use this term, I've always noticed it's always used in a vague sense. This game is clunky, the combat is clunky. Oh, okay, why is it clunky? Well, it feels awkward. What's that supposed to mean? Awkward as in how it looks, how it plays, or how you even attack enemies? I think generally people are pointing at a real issue, but calling something clunky is so vague that it could mean anything. So I'm going to try to be specific here. When you are doing attack combos or weapon skills in Metallic Child, you are locked in the animation afterwards. You can't disengage from the animation just from moving the stick or pressing attack again. Basically, it's end leg. So you could be attacking one dude, and the guy next to him uses that opportunity to try to potshot you like it's a Fortnite kid chug-jugging the ketamine he found under the kitchen sink. In fact, some of your weapon animations are unusually long, like when you're about to throw an enemy, or when you perform the end of your attack combo. There's just enough time where you open yourself up to an enemy punishing you for performing combos. You know, the thing you're supposed to do in the game. For a while I was just wondering, why is the game like this? How does the developer actually want you to play? And to be clear, I'm fine with a roguelite having slower combat. Hades lets you be fast and snappy, whereas Curse of the Dead Gods is slower and encourages you to be more intentional and careful. So what's going on here? Why does Metallic Child feel so off? So I took a break, and it made creating this video take longer than it probably should have. But I'm glad I did, because when developers create a video game, I want to engage with that game on its own terms. I shouldn't treat Metallic Child like it's supposed to play like Hades, or like Curse of the Dead Gods, or like Pure Cancer. Simply put, I should play it like it's Metallic Child. So, okay, let's rethink things. Let's actually try to learn the game. In the words of perhaps the greatest philosopher of the modern century, I got good. And I'm glad I did. Because even though what I know now doesn't necessarily negate my previous criticisms, it does weaken them, because there are ways to play around the issues. For example, let's go back to the first criticism. Enemies are unusually aggressive and tend to interrupt you while playing the game. They do. However, if we accept that this is the case, then it's obvious what needs to happen. We have to crowd control. I know that when I'm beating down on an enemy, that enemy is constantly being hit stun. They're not going to suddenly attack me or do anything else. So when I am comboing, my eyes should not be focusing on them. Instead, I should be focusing on everyone else around me. If there's an enemy who's right next to me as I'm doing my combo, I have options. I can throw them to whoever I'm worried about to interrupt their attack and finish the original dude off. I can roll or guard. I can try to pivot into attacking them instead. If I have a specific weapon skill that offers utility, I can use that. Or quite simply, if there's multiple enemies that I can't deal with and I know I'm going to get hit, just stop what I'm doing and run away. Yeah, I can do that. In fact, you'll have to accept doing that because kiting and crowd control is so important. The simple fact is that Metallic Child, even on the normal difficulty, can be a hard game. You need to keep your HP high for the boss encounter, but there are going to be lots of rooms where you have to fight in where you can make one too many mistakes. The level layout in the game is randomly generated, so you're not always going to find the boss door quickly. Instead, focus on always dividing mobs away from each other. If you can't do that, then divide yourself away from them. It sounds really basic when I say it out loud, but Metallic Child forces you to unlearn habits you might be used to from other games. Let's keep going and address the second criticism of the combat being clunky. Well, there are ways to mitigate that too. After reading a tip on one of the loading screens and experimenting, you can animation cancel almost any attack in the game with the dodge button, especially so if you're using sword and shield. And yes, doing the full attack combo locks your character awkwardly. However, at the end of your initial combo, aim to do skill attacks instead, or a throw. A lot of the time, it's not worth the extra attack at the end of the combo. You're probably better off punching them 3 times, skill attack, and comboing 3 times to keep the chain going. I can keep going on about these small tips, like if crowd control is so important, then always prioritizing to have a robot buddy with you is always a good idea. But these are just examples of what I've learned when I was struggling with the combat, and I appreciate the game for that. Metallic Child has a very unusual, aggressive, defensive playstyle that I don't see in a lot of other action games, so slowly applying what I've learned to get better and better at clearing stages was immensely satisfying and rewarding. But sometimes, getting good lets you see more clearly at what the game does bad. For certain video game genres like fighting games, people are happy to get into deep discussions of what exactly is wrong with their certain mechanics or movesets. But I don't see that same level of scrutiny for action games when being specific can really help identify why something is off, beyond one's ability to get good. So I'm going to try to do that here. For example, when I was experimenting, I realized that Rona could pivot her character freely, but when you're constantly attacking, she's instead locked to this weird circle. This is a problem because sometimes when doing a combo, you want to hard pivot to deal with an incoming enemy, but pivoting during an attack will make you do awkward turns. So you either hit the wrong enemy around you, or miss entirely. This is not the case in other action roguelites, like Hades or Curse of the Dead Gods, because they allow you to pivot during an attack combo, probably to avoid this very problem. I can keep going. For some reason, right after a throw, you can mash the dodge button, but Rona will not do it. You have to wait a second or two for it to work again for no discernible reason. This causes you during intense fights to take damage that really isn't your fault. We can talk about how the auto-aim in this game isn't as tight as it should be. I can throw an enemy at another mob, and if I don't aim the analog stick exactly at my target, I can completely whiff my attack. Same thing with weapon skills. Is it a skill issue? Sure, but expecting accuracy from a player in a melee-focused isometric game is weird. Alright, check this out. Sometimes when an enemy attacks, they shoot a red projectile. Here's an example of a few of them. Take a second and guess which ones you're allowed to jump over and which ones you will take damage if you try to jump them. Alright, time is up. Here's the real answer. None of them. That's right, even though some of these attacks clearly look like they're low to the ground, you have to pretend red projectiles basically have infinite height. Unless you avoid them or guard them, they will always hit you. It's not intuitive because during an intense fight, my brain thinks Rona can jump them when she can't. Is there any real reason why we can't do that? Jumping is always kind of lame in this game because other than avoiding very few ground attacks and maybe one platforming gimmick in one level, you almost never have a real reason to jump, ever. Even if we just have to accept that you have to avoid the red projectiles, this makes them the most dangerous attack in the game. Most of the time, you can only rely on the fact that enemies cannot hit you if they're far away from you, making crowd control generally predictable. But red projectiles are the exception to that. Certain enemies can spam red projectiles, multiple red projectiles, that can quickly drain your stamina and your life bar if you're not careful, making them a constant nuisance, especially when 90% of the time, there are very few weapons in the game that lets Rona use projectiles, making red projectile enemies way less fun to fight than even the higher tier melee enemies. Talking about weapons, you have a button in this game to switch between two different weapons at any time. But here's the catch. Whenever you press the button, you automatically activate that weapon's skill attack without consuming any stamina. Cool, right? Well, here's the big problem. Sometimes you don't want to do the weapon skill. Sometimes you just want to switch to sword and shield because guarding is better against certain enemies and you just want to have access to that guard. So you do the weapon skill, you attack something you didn't mean to, and you get hit. Unless you always think ahead to press guard again to animation cancel it. And that gets more annoying to do with gauntlets and hammers because having to dodge just to animation cancel the attack can put you in a bad spot. Okay, look, these criticisms are not game-breaking issues. And I don't even think it makes combat bad. I like comboing enemies in this game. I like the slower pace of fights. I like being able to throw enemies across the room and even to other enemies for big multi-kills. I like how absurdly strong some of the unique weapons are, from ones that let you plant mines to weapons letting you zip across the room. Once I understood how the game works, it became much easier and much more fun for me to play. But the criticisms show that there are genuine problems in this game that I don't think Studio HD considered. There's a lot more to making a good combat system than it feels and looks good to play. Action games are some of my favorite genres in video games, and identifying these issues made me realize there's a lot more thought and care put into action games than I previously thought. So it's important to recognize both the good with the bad, in the hopes that things can only improve into the future. So, that is the combat. But in my opinion, a roguelike is made up of two parts. The main gameplay loop, and what I like to call the metagame, that sits on top of it. Power-ups, upgrades, permanent increases, basically the systems that try to make the game interesting to play through every time. Metallic Child tries to do something different to shake things up, the mini-core system. So basically during the level, Rona could carry up to 3 mini-cores which act as affixes. Sometimes they can be beneficial, like giving you stat increases to certain attacks. Sometimes they can be supreme mini-cores, giving you really strong effects. Or sometimes they can be bugged mini-cores, giving you a negative effect. You can pick mini-cores up from the ground as the items drop, or, most of the time, you get mini-cores by absorbing them off defeated enemies. However, you get a random one, so you're always playing a constant game of Russian roulette with Rona. Even bugged mini-cores are really good to get. The twist in Metallic Child is that mini-cores are very temporary effects. They only last maybe 1 to 3 minutes, and for every bugged mini-core you get bug data in return, which acts as a currency for getting the stronger core upgrades. The big core upgrades, unlike mini cores, are permanent upgrades for Rona for the rest of that particular run. You choose from several randomized options until you hit the core level cap of 10. The weaker core upgrades usually don't cost any bug data, but some of the best ones in the game require at least a few. So dealing with a few very temporary negative effects to eventually have access to big upgrades, like doing extra damage for the rest of the run, is a cool idea. On top of all that, slotting in 3 mini-cores of any type will put Rona into core connect mode. You do more damage and your skill attacks are enhanced, usually by either making them do extra damage or they do extra effects like shooting an additional projectile. So even bugged mini-cores can be useful to get into core connect mode faster. Personally, I think this is a pretty ingenious upgrade system, as it incentivizes a very fast playstyle that synergizes with the defensive and aggressive combat loop I mentioned before. Rona is always attacking enemies, is always upgrading herself, is always consuming mini-cores, and is always moving in and out of core connect mode. Keep the pace up, use the upgrader, choose the best core upgrades, don't get hit, aim for those S ranks. You're always making these micro decisions across the entirety of your run. The downside to the mini-core system though is that it's basically the ultimate ADHD filter. It adds to the sensory overload I get with this game after seeing core connect and S ranks blare into my eyeballs 100 times a run. Besides that, the extremely temporary nature of mini-cores means that you don't pay attention to your upgrades like you do in other roguelites. You might take a quick glance at your mini-cores, see something like the 30% extra damage to throw at enemies and try to keep that in mind, but ultimately, you'll be too busy blasting through rooms to pay attention. You'll be more focused on the 3 dudes across the room trying to potshot you than whatever you slurped up from the previous room. Weapons and core levels are really the only things that are permanent for your character in a run. And honestly, sometimes the options you're given are less about making a build and more about what gives me the most power. For example, one of the best core upgrades in the game is the one that makes your attacks deal a wider hit radius, which is great for crowd control, and I'd rather pick that up over slightly improving the efficiency of skills, even though the former is a lower rarity. Weapons can have cool effects, but higher rarity weapons deal more damage, which makes S-rank weapons always the superior choice unless a lower tiered weapon has a really good skill. I feel like this might be disappointing to people who play a lot of other roguelites, because games like Hades really makes me think about what I'm building towards and what skills synergize with each other. But you know what? The way Metallic Child does things might appeal more to people who want to focus on the action part of their action roguelite and not look at the Path of Exile skill tree for 30 minutes. I think this is a totally valid way of approaching the roguelite genre. Metallic Child is all about making a bunch of small decisions, while the vast majority of your ability to beat the game is down to skill, not your ability to push for certain upgrades. Now don't get me wrong, there are times when a certain combination of upgrades have me walk into the boss room and absolutely mog them straight into the Shadow Realm, but I don't think that's a problem. This is a game where you can god roll into beating the level, but if you play well enough, then you can still rely on beating it with suboptimal upgrades. Beyond mini-cores, the game has your typical assortment of side systems. As you fight across rooms, you're constantly gaining 2 types of currency: discs, which last for that particular run, and chips, for permanent upgrades at the hub area. Since the levels are randomized, some rooms have shops you can use to buy with discs, or some rooms have upgrade stations or chests that you can only unlock with a certain number of discs. By far, the coolest side system in Metallic Child are the side quests, where you meet unique and quirky NPCs who offer you rewards in exchange for performing certain tasks. Some NPCs are somewhat related to the story, like Catherine, who has a one-sided rivalry against Dr. Irene and lashes out against Rona vicariously, having you fight a mini-boss to slap her down for a free chest upgrade. Or you get wacky NPCs like Miamo, a literal live streamer who boarded onto an exploding space station just for those epic Twitch views, and has Rona fight specific enemies to get your viewer count up. I love the little details in this game, like you can even see the comments zoom past the screen like actual in-game live streams in Asian regions. Same thing for another detail I liked from a different NPC named Trevin, who has Rona carrying a vaccine and needs you to bring it to the delivery point without getting hit. The case Rona carries is a direct Death Stranding reference, and man, I just love stuff like that. You can really tell they had a lot of fun making this game. Like if you put down the controller and just idle for a bit, Rona will start waving at you. Or sometimes at the title screen you have a random chance of Rona showing up to clap to the music. I feel like if a developer goes out of their way to include these little details, but they were clearly not necessary to make the game at all, it tells me that they actually cared about what they were making. I think the only part of Metallic Child that rubs me the wrong way is the fact that the game clearly builds itself as a roguelite. I've used that word a lot, and I think it's important to explain it a bit. There isn't a dictionary definition, but the general consensus is that roguelikes are games where progress completely resets after a run, whereas roguelites have some form of progression between runs. The problem with Metallic Child is that I like how weird and unique the progression system is during a run. The progression in between runs is, not good. So here's the thing. Back at the hub after any run, you can use the chips you've earned to unlock permanent upgrades. But there are two main issues. The first is that the upgrades suck. There's no going around this. You go to the upgrader, and all you get are number increases to passive stats. Yeah, wow. Plus 7 HP. Very exciting. But some of these number increases they just don't make any sense. The weapon expertise, for example. It increases the drop rate of high level weapons from 3% at level 1 to 15% at level 4. Wow, 15% increased drop rate. But wait, it just increases the drop rate of high level weapons, not in general. So when a weapon drops, it's 15% more likely to be a high level weapon. What does that mean? Like, is the weapon going to be A rank or S rank? I don't know. But what I do know is that this upgrade is stupid, but it gets worse. The second issue is how much upgrade currency you actually get to spend. So in my entire playthrough, which I think took me about 15 hours, in total I only had just enough chips to level up the upgrader 7 times.
Oh my god.
No, you've heard me right. Just 7 times.
Oh, hell.
I dumped 4 of them into weapon expertise. So the other 3 was stuff like extra HP or stamina. 7! In 15 hours! For minor passive stat increases.
What the fuck were they thinking?
I don't understand. I mean, can you think of any other roguelite out there where you only permanently upgrade your character 7 times? Probably not many, because in a lot of them, you want to feel like there's a significant power gap between you when you started the game versus where you are hours into the game. The only other permanent upgrade you could get are the character customs, basically outfits you could buy for Rona. They change her appearance and usually gives her a beneficial effect. Let's look at the very first one. 450 chips just to improve one of the Metallic Child skills we can earn. It adds 1 more Hydra Worm to the attack. For context, MC skills aren't bad, but they're on an extremely long cooldown. It takes absolutely forever to get the MC energy needed to play with them. So most of the time you're just better off blowing them for the big boss battles. Hell, you can bring 2 MC skills to the stage, but they share the goddamn same energy bar. And for 450 chips, I get 1 more warm buddy. Wow. Thanks, that's really epic. If I am being charitable, maybe the thought process here was that they just wanted a way for players to have Rona equip cute outfits, and the passive enhancements were just icing on the cake. In a vacuum, sure, I could see that. But when the rest of the progression system already has gaping holes and only character customs has cool stuff for you to buy, it really stands out in a really bad way. Probably the best custom to get is the dealer's box, because it guarantees a weapon box in the first level. And this game is already stingy enough with weapon drops, where sometimes I have to use the level C weapon I started the run with to fight the boss. Level B, level A, level S weapons? Good luck. Oh, but look, dealer's box requires 800 chips. 800 chips! Am I buying an upgrade in a video game, or am I splitting rent with a friend downtown? And the prices only get worse. God knows how many runs I have to do if I want to unlock all of this. In all fairness, it wasn't until I've beaten the game that I realized that the achievements section of the hub server room gave you chips as rewards. But even the payouts are anemic. 150 chips after beating a boss? Wow, cool. On one hand, I get it. The game is fun, and they want to give people a grind. People enjoy grinding. But when I do well in a stage and I don't even bring back home 100 chips, something is up. Alright kids, this reminds me of a puzzle. Let's investigate and see what we got here. Steam store page. Okay, let's see. Oh! What is this? Chip packs. I can buy a pack of chips. This seems familiar. $3 Canadian for 500 chips. That's about 2 USD, I think? And that's like, what, maybe 4 good runs? 20.52 Canadian for 4,000 chips. 20 Canadian doubloons. I think that's like 16 USD? Wait. Dude. They're offering a free chip pack. Look, it's literally a Steam DLC. You can get that adds 200 chips to your save file. Wait, what if you start a new game? Does it even carry over?
What the fuck were they thinking?
Alright. Here's what I'm gonna say. The passive upgrades are a joke. I think the only ones to genuinely help you is extra HP and extra battery. Taking an extra hit or having more stamina is good, but it's not exciting. The character customs are cool, but not once in my entire playthrough I felt the need to buy any of them. In fact, I've only ever used the default character to beat the game with. It's just a missed opportunity because for as much as this game is clearly inspired by Mega Man, some of my fondest memories of those games was a hunt for those sick armor upgrades. And this just feels like someone slapped a giant brick wall in front of that treasure hunt. Look, I don't want to assume bad intentions, especially from smaller tier developers. However, it is very difficult for me to believe that it's just a coincidence that you are drip fed these chips, but conveniently, you could spend $16 for 4,000 chips. I don't know if this was Studio HG's decision or their publishing partner Crest, but it leaves a really bad taste when you sell power for a paid single player game. Games like Hades cost exactly the same, yet they didn't pull the same stunt. It deserves to be called out, and I strongly argue that they should never do this again. If not, just straight up remove this crap from the store and give us more chips both after a successful run and from achievements. But considering the fact that this game only has about 1,000 Steam reviews, I don't think Metallic Child did as well as Studio HG had hoped. For reference, the last game I covered, Lunacid, has over 1,800 Steam reviews, and I consider that game to be unpopular. It's unfortunate, because despite all my criticisms, I only bring them up because I still really like this game. You come back from a bad run and Pan shows up, cheers you up, telling you that a new fan art is available in the server room. Yeah, really, the developer went out of their way to include people's submitted fan art directly into the game. You can unlock them manually, in addition to Pan decrypting records left before the rebellion. Records are used to flesh out the world building beyond just the events Rona experiences in the game. From silly messages like Lucy on the research team talking about anime, to more heartwarming messages like Dr. Irene comparing the story of Pinocchio to Rona, and only wanting the world to accept her. Beyond gameplay, I believe a lot of what makes this game work are its characters. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the story itself is especially well written. It's actually pretty simple in execution, but considering how easy it is for any story in a video game to suddenly become a dumpster fire at the end, I do appreciate Metallic Child trying to get the fundamentals right. Pan is basically the closest thing Rona has to a brother. He is always mindful about her well-being, both physically and emotionally. Dr. Irene genuinely loves Rona, promising Rona that she'll grow up happy and one day she'll take her back to Earth. However, Dr. Irene feels trapped that despite her brilliance and despite everything she accomplished as a scientist, she always can't protect Rona from the world as a mother. Dr. Locus, well, I mean, Dr. Locus is an asshole, but even then, he isn't doing what he's doing because he woke up in the morning and decided to be evil. Dr. Irene thought that she could roll up at a multinational global company, spend millions of their dollars to build a surrogate daughter and just walk off into the sunset. He feels Irene is dreaming, whereas he is just accepting reality. The Metallic Child project needed to be profitable, one way or another. Even you, yes, you, can be fun. The you in this game story can be a little snarky and leans a little hard into the gamer motif, but it can be entertaining seeing you, Pan, and Rona banter between each other in the story segments. Is you being in the game just a transparent attempt at the developer creating an artificial parasocial relationship between the player and the game? Yes. Is it cringe? Yeah. But honestly, these days, as I get older, I'm starting to accept that I'd rather experience a story that's cringe, but tries to be sincere, than a story that's cinematic and tries to subvert my expectations. Finally, of course, there is Rona. Kind, good-natured, always willing to see the best possible move to improve the situation. I won't spell anything major in this game, but early on, Rona talks about herself in the observatory, how all the other scientists saw her as an underperforming nuisance, in contrast to Irene, who didn't hesitate to embrace her as a mother. People looked down at Rona for being an unnecessary unit compared to the other metallic children who were stronger, faster, and smarter than her. But Rona didn't care too much about that. She just wanted to be accepted and loved by others. Not quite a combat machine, but not quite human either. Rejected by both machines and humans, Rona clearly has her own emotional baggage, but is trying her best to cope with what she is. For some people, they may not appreciate this game's sappy melodrama and making you care about what's going on. But you know what? This game does just enough to make me want to see these characters succeed, and see what happens to Rona. Roguelites tend to be straight up video games, if you know what I mean. You go in, play the game, and the story is kinda there. But if the popularity of Hades taught us anything, it's that a decent story can hook people in. Gameplay is king, but having a good story makes for a good incentive to keep you playing. Before we wrap things up, the last thing I want to touch on is a little history about this game. Because I was genuinely curious, who is Studio HG? Where did this game come from? And let me tell you, it was a little bit more of a rabbit hole than I thought it was going to be. So, if you look at the Steam page for Metallic Child's developer, there's only really Metallic Child as their main successful game. Did Studio HG pop out of the earth and make a game of this quality out of nowhere? Who are these people? First, I tried looking at their website about the developers to see if there's anything I can learn about them. Let's see. Studio HG is a game development studio created by veteran developers who have experienced a number of projects. We make games with great stories and great gameplay. Okay, well at least we found out that Studio HG has in fact made previous video games. Let's take a look. Overturn is a 2017 VR first-person shooter. It seems like across all of their games, they primarily work with the Unity engine, and immediately I can tell that a lot of Overturn looks like Metallic Child. The glossy environments, high contrast lighting, and heck, even the designs. They were actually being pretty ambitious here, trying to do a story-driven FPS. I actually own a VR headset, and I paid a lot of attention to VR games quite a bit, so I'm surprised I've never heard of this one. 2017 was a very early period for VR games. That's when the first consumer Oculus headset and the HTC Vive were still new. So most games around this time were mostly simple, short arcade experiences. It was also a period where VR games were very rough. It was a new way of making games and nobody knew what they were doing. I think the only few VR games offering a single-player campaign during this time was Raw Data and Arizona Sunshine, which I don't think anyone even remembers. So even if the trailer does look jank, it's impressive that they opted to try their hand at a 3-hour campaign at all. That being said, maze-like levels, confusing puzzles, bad movement, it's very rough. But apparently, every level gets better, introducing new weapons and skills, and people seem to have liked the combat. I noticed that at the bottom of the Steam page, they had intentions of updating the game with a multiplayer PvP arena mode. But I can probably guess what happened. It didn't do as well as they hoped and they abandoned it. I can't blame them. I think this game was too much of an experiment. Maybe their other game did better? Smashing the Battle was a 2016 isometric battler where you play as a girl with blue eyes and white hair beating down waves of enemies. Well, I think we found the predecessor for Metallic Child. I don't know what's with Asian regions and girls with white hair though. The big difference is that instead of playing as a little robot kid, you play as two big bodacious babes, each with their own playstyle and stories. Reviews for this game are better than the VR experiment. Steam has this game at mostly positive reviews out of 500 user reviews. People like the character designs and the combat, 30 story levels, 80 challenge maps, unlockable outfits, decent repetitive fun. I do admit it looks even more like a mobile game than Metallic Child does, But on Studio HG's website, it lists the game as literally being a mobile phone game, though it seems like I could no longer install on my Pixel phone, which is unfortunately true for these older Android and Apple games. Regardless, it's cool to see how Metallic Child is a spiritual sequel to this game. You can see the influences everywhere. Like for example, just like Metallic Child, Smashing the Battle has unlockable fan art. I do have to ask though, why didn't I see this game on the developer's Steam page? Well, it turns out it's because they're under different brandings. Notice for Metallic Child, they're listed as Action Square Studio HG, but Smashing the Battle isn't fully capitalized. Yeah, I know, big difference there. At first I suspected it might have been done maliciously, like a developer over-promising and then under-delivering a game, then making a new game with a slightly different name to avoid community flack. I'm not singling out any particular game out there, but you know, there are developers who do that. But I don't think it's the case here, because Smashing the Battle seems to have a positive reception. As for Overturn, it still had people leaving positive reviews. I don't know, maybe they really wanted their names to be capitals. I don't know. I kept digging, because I still didn't know much about Studio HG. I don't know why, but at this point I was far too deep into the rabbit hole and I just had to know. Who made these games? I still don't have a face or a name. But I found something. Studio HG's profile on Sketchfab, a website designed for community artists to share 3D models. Studio HG, located in Seoul, Korea, a one-man game developer. One person, 3 whole-ass games. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Life was gamer, playing video games vividly in a violent venue. A stream where everyone sought solace in silly situations. A partner, a fellow peer, a personal friend, who was always prepared to play. Sometimes, gamers lose. It was just me. On a case for the past few months, too many cases went too cold. Too much time lost. I lost myself to this. Metallic Child, Studio HG. What did it all mean? It was too hard to digest. I said that as I ate my next chicken nugget, crunching down the breaded chicken like I had crunched myself down for the past few weeks. Away from everyone else. Taking too much time to digest will only turn what you're consuming into shit. And somebody is gonna have to flush it. Huh? A phone call? The ritual is almost complete. I'm making a pilgrimage to Amazon rainforest, and if I am successful, he will return. Another distraction. But I had an answer. I'm sorry, but I'm too fucking autistic to listen to people properly. I think I have motherfucking dyslexia! Huh. Works every time. Now I can focus. Studio HG was one person all along, but how could one person make an entire game? I found it. Their YouTube page. I was so close now. I can almost taste it. Yeah, of course. I thought it was weird that Metallic Child had both Japanese and Korean dubs. It would make sense that if the game was made by Korean developers, they opted to pay for an entire Japanese dub just to appeal to a larger audience. It's no secret that these games dip heavily into the anime subculture, but damn, that's a lot of work for the developers. Well, I say developers, but more accurately, developer. One person. It contextualizes all the problems I had with Metallic Child. Running through the Steam discussion board, I found a post directly from the developer themselves, HG. I don't know for sure if during Metallic Child's development whether there was anybody else working on the game at all, but at the very least, it does seem like HG themselves were the lead developer. Programming, art, testing, I wouldn't be surprised if most of the game had to be done by HG alone. I later found Studio HG's YouTube page, and after a little digging, I think I found our guy. Not a face though, I don't speak Korean, so I can't confirm if HG is any one of these videos. But I did find a video where you can see him running an extremely alpha build of Smashing the Battle on an old Samsung phone back in 2015, back when the project was codenamed Battle Girl, 8 years ago. In fact, you can find all sorts of videos related to all of Studio HG games at various points of development, even for a very early look at the first beta build of Metallic Child. I'm genuinely impressed. It must have been an insane amount of work for somebody to not just design, script, write, program, bug test, and art their own game, but to also work with a publisher to get it on PC, Nintendo Switch, and PlayStation 4. I've seen games made by bigger teams and bigger budgets turn to complete dumpster fires, but HG not only made a game, but released 3 of them, learning Unity and messing around on a Samsung phone. Videos where he details the process of making certain aspects of the game, like the animated art stills. Some people dream about making their own creative work one day, but HG is out there doing the work. I need to remind myself to stay objective to have a proper grasp on the game, but at the very least, the work ethic required must be respected. Hey, you've heard of Studio Trigger? They made some cool stuff. I think they made some robot cartoon and something about girls going to school. Whatever. The point is that it blows my mind that Studio HG and Crest actually got Studio Trigger to make an animated opening for this game. Yeah, holy shit. That's a surprise. Now granted, sure they got Studio Trigger, but it also looks like they paid Studio Trigger a bunch of V-Bucks and a few candy bars to make it. It's not the best animation they ever done, but damn dude. I think Studio HG just wanted to do it anyways. So much of the game is clearly inspired by anime, so why not? Also, the music slaps.
あなただけが私の希望です。さあ、一緒に戦いましょう。譲れない願い事宿った心傷だらけそれでもいい私は負けない憧れに続いてゆく道へあの日感じたぬくもり抱きしめる胸の奥ともるあなたがくれたもの消せないよね立ち上がる勇気だけは誰も壊せない無機質なこの両手でもちゃんと守れるよ私あなたの想いまだ触れてたいの命尽きるまで
It's just confusing how I didn't realize this animation existed until way after I did all this research. It's not on the Steam page, and it's not in the game, unless it's hidden somewhere. So why pay for an anime opening you didn't even include? I have to assume it's because of some weird licensing agreement. I don't know. Regardless, Metallic Child went on to release on September 15th, 2021, and the game currently has a very positive rating on Steam from around 1,000 user reviews. Throughout the rest of the year, the updates didn't stop coming, and they weren't just bug fixes either. Some also introduced small content changes, like update patch 1210 in October of 2021 that allowed you to get the Halloween costume for Rona that allows you to spam pumpkin bombs, or later that year for patch 1224, where it added Christmas costumes. Perhaps Metallic Child's most significant update arrived on February 24th, 2022, where Studio HG introduced the Advanced update, a new difficulty setting that makes the game harder, introducing way more mobs into the arena and higher tier enemies. I appreciate this, as once you've grasped the combat loop, the game ironically got way easier, for the most part. So giving players the option to replay older levels to get separate S ranks on the Advanced difficulty is a cool grind. But damn, this difficulty is something else. I don't recommend touching this for your first playthrough. The Advanced update also introduced a new Endless mode, new weapons, and new customs. Honestly, it's pretty great. Studio HG even added a custom referencing his Overturned VR game, if you probably wanted one of the most obscure self-references I've ever seen. Unfortunately, the last major content release for Metallic Child would be on March 30th, 2022, celebrating the Sukuna Rice and Ruin crossover DLC. The DLC is actually made up of 2 parts. Rice and Cores has Rona dressing up as Sukuna. The second DLC is Koko Roa, where Rona dresses up as another character from the crossover game and spams projectiles, which actually makes us feel pretty unique as most of the weapons in Metallic Child are melee focused. Both DLCs adds a new boss for you to fight, and the vanilla weapons suck, so running around with actually good starting gear is pretty fun. Are the DLCs worth it? maybe they're well made and the new boss is cool. But ultimately I feel like these are just something you'd buy if you really enjoy Metallic Child and just want an excuse to play it again. There's a bundle to buy them both for 15 Canadian dollars, but considering the game's base price is 32 Canadian dollars, that price is already half of the game. For that kind of price to value ratio, I'm gonna have to say people would expect a proper DLC expansion, so honestly, I don't think I could recommend buying them. At the very least, only pick them up on sale and only if you're looking for more content. Metallic Child simply wasn't popular enough for this, and I feel like, for a game of this quality, with this story and all these little details and these updates, that is unfortunate, because it deserves to be played by more people. I came to this conclusion when I got near the end of this game. No spoilers, but the final level of this game has a gauntlet of some of the hardest bullshit the game throws at you. Enemy spam, a bunch of elite enemies, a confusing map layout, and fast obstacles making you want to take tons of damage. Like holy shit, this level was kicking my ass. But I kept going at it, listening to this music the entire time. The story was going places, and listening to this music track that felt like it came off the left side of Nier Automata, I had to persevere. It took me several attempts, but when I finally beat that final boss and saw that ending, yeah, I recommend Metallic Child. But I recommend it only on the basis that you're aware of its issues. Clunky combat quirks, poor monetization, underbaked meta progression. I also can't just ignore the fact that the game costs as much as Hades, which, in my eyes, is a far superior product in both gameplay and story, or costs more than Curse of the Dead Gods, which in my eyes again, is a far superior roguelite. But sometimes, judging something isn't about how much better it is versus everything else. A game can be more than the sum of its individual parts. Presentation, story, music, encounters. The game, after many updates, is more than content complete, and Studio HG has shown that they had put plenty of effort and care put into it. If you are someone looking for a game to pick up, play through, and at the end of that journey you tell yourself, I really enjoyed spending my time with this game, I think you would enjoy Metallic Child. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching. Hey, it's me. It's been a while. During the making of this video, I had a different outro planned, but unfortunately a tragedy had occurred. I won't go into detail, but it affected me on a very personal level. I was thinking of just dropping this video altogether, but the whole reason I made this in the first place is because I always wanted to make a long-form video about something I was passionate about. And I realized that as I'm getting older, I don't want that idea to just be an idea in my head. So, I finally did it. And I don't know if I would say I'm okay, but I think now I'm definitely feeling better. So, I'll see you guys in another 9 months as I forget that this channel even exists. And I got some people I gotta go back and meet again. See you later.